morning, 9:30 in Switzerland. It's Space Cafe time. Our Space Cafe Law Breakfast with Stephen Freeland will begin soon. Thank you for joining us to our breakfast roundtable today. You see, in this wonderful cafe house environment, we all came together. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. And now, I am handing you over to your co-host and our publisher, Torsten. Over to you.
Hey, thank you, Chiara. I'm Torsten Kriening, your co-host today and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. We are Switzerland-based, Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Cafe podcast and our new Space Cafe radio. And I can tell you a lot of cool things will come in the Space Cafe radio our series in the next days, because we are just returned from Brussels from the EU Space Conference, where we interviewed a number of amazing people you will love. We also keep our fan shop open and online for you, where you can support us actively and become a Space Watcher. Edition 1 has the cool items for you and the ones you love, and your support is really needed. So we also have a supporter program, as you might know, where you also can help us. If you missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website in the event section and on YouTube. So we will host our Space Cafe Law Breakfast, as you already know, in the 7th edition here with Stephen Freeland live on a bi-monthly basis. And we are also planning ahead for this year already. So we will keep you updated with the news from the space community, space law community. And with that, I'm done for the moment. And hand over to your host in hopefully sunny, warm Sydney today, Professor Stephen Freeland. Over to you, my friend.
Thank you, my good friend Torsten. Hi, everybody from Sydney. Yes, it was a lovely sunny day today, about 27 degrees, and I managed to have a quick swim during the day, which was lovely. So I hope wherever you are in the world, and I know we've got people from many places, I hope you're all well and safe, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to, as Torsten said already, our 7th Law Breakfast. Time flies. My name is Stephen Freeland. Hopefully you know a little bit about me and welcome. And today, it's a special day, Torsten. Whose birthday is it today, Torsten? No, let people guess. Who is this? This is today.
Okay, we can ask people in the chat and reward them with a T-shirt if you want. So.
Oh,
OST? Okay, OST is fine. Elena, OST does not play music.
No, whose music is this, Elena? It's somebody's, I'll tell you, 266th birthday today. And I'm celebrating with
come
cake.
On.
Valentine.
An Austrian from Vienna. Hey, come on, that's not fair. I mean, okay, it's even Vienna, it's not Salzburg. Valentine.
You win the prize. I'm not sure what the prize is, but thank you. Yeah, today is Mozart's 266th birthday, and we had a little bit of the Jupiter Symphony. Then Mozart.
That's Magic Flute. We changed it.
Now you've changed to Magic Flute, of course. So you're really throwing me around here.
It's a live program.
When you Google Mozart and outer space, now I bet you've never done that before. Google and outer space, Mozart and outer space. There's so much there. Of course, there's the Jupiter Symphony, which Torsten and I agreed he would play, but of course he's playing a trick on me. Mozart's Queen of the Night aria from Magic Flute is actually on the Voyager record. We know that. And I mentioned this to Guoyu in the green room. For those Chinese people in China who are watching, famous Chinese director Chen Siqing has just made a movie called Mozart from Space, which is not yet available, but Guoyu promises me that he'll circulate the details when it comes out. So Mozart and space, who would have thought? I think Torsten will add this tradition to our space breakfast, famous person's birthday, and we'll make it difficult. So anyway, welcome to the show.
We just have to watch out for the licenses, but it's a minor detail because hey, we have a bunch of lawyers in the house.
That's only law. Who cares? You know. Look, welcome. You know what the space breakfast is, but for those who have not joined before, our role here is to sort of deconstruct law. We have two amazing friends and experts. I'll introduce them in a minute. And we'll look at things that are happening in space, things that have happened, things that might happen, technology, and we'll try to deconstruct it and also throw in how law might be relevant and how other things might be relevant as well. I've got two great friends, as I said, Gerardine, Escolar, and Guoyu, Wang. I'll introduce them in a minute. But before we do that, our next tradition in the breakfast is to try to work out where we are. And today we are in Singapore. So Jerry, this is your hometown. I know you're in The Hague at the moment, but tell us where we are today. What's this cafe?
Well, thanks, Stephen, and hello, everyone. Well, happy birthday to Wolfie, obviously, Wolfgang, Caroline Herschel, Valentine as well, and the Outer Space Treaty. So it's a big party in the house today. But right now, we're in a wonderful place that really deserves its name. I think it's called My Awesome Café in Singapore. And it's situated at a place called Telok Ayer Street, close to Chinatown in Singapore. Now, what I love about this street is that it showcases the very multicultural and diverse nature of my home city of Singapore. And on the street, you find various different houses of worship. You have the Nagara Gurha, which is a shrine built by Muslims from South India, the Yu Huang Gong Temple, the Taoist temple. We have the Tian Hock Keng Temple, which was built for the worship of Matu, which is a Chinese sea goddess and the oldest Hokkien temple in the country. We have the Masjid El Abrar, a mosque built by immigrants from the Coromandel coast of South India, and the Telok Ayer Chinese Methodist Church. So the cafe itself is situated on the premises of the former Zhonghua Free Clinic. Now, this was a traditional Chinese medical institution that provided free medicine, medical advice, and herbs to all needy patients from every walk of life, which was so important in the early days of Singapore, when Singapore really was an immigrant society and people were coming from Asia and abroad. Now, this particular cafe is special to me because it showcases how communities are stronger for being diverse and for leveraging the goodwill, talent, and character of people, regardless of their background. Because of the premises, so you come in, it's just steeped in history. And it also really is a labor of love because it really builds on its proud history. It fuses sustainability and vintage vibes and a sense of really knowing one's own roots while looking forward. So great vibe, exceptional service, a really mean duck roulette sandwich, and a fantastic barista who makes coffee that's just out of this world. As my friends know, coffee really important to me.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. And look, I think we're honored to be here. Thank you for that. And thank you for welcoming us to Singapore and to this amazing place.
It's a pleasure, Stephen.
So today we're going to look at some really interesting issues. You know, the Space Cafe, we've looked at human rights issues, we've looked at commercial space, human space flight, we've looked at so many things. Today we're really looking at things that have come up quite recently in the news and trying to deconstruct that. So in the news lately, we've had lots of discussion about the ever-increasing collision risks in space, obviously from space debris, but also the exponential growth of plans and also launches of small satellites. So we'll talk about that. We'll ask some important questions about how do we regulate that? Should national regulators, in the way that they authorize under their national laws, should they perhaps be more globally focused and perhaps less parochial when they're assessing these applications? We'll also look at technology and AI and how AI is changing the way space operates. So if that sounds interesting for you, please stay there, put your questions, your comments there. We'll answer some questions. We'll talk about anything you want to talk. So let me introduce formally my two dear friends. Thanks for joining us. Firstly, Gerardine Escolar. She's adjunct professor at the Faculty of Law at NUS. She teaches international space law. She's also Deputy Secretary General at the Hague Conference of Private International Law, which is an international governmental organization in The Hague, obviously, working towards the progressive unification of the rules of private international law, which are also relevant for space, of course. And she heads various groups there, as well as being the Deputy Secretary General, very much involved in digital economy, in AI, in tokenization, in fintech. She's worked with startups, with legal tech. She's served as a legal officer to the government of Germany. She's advised through a top-tier law firm on international dispute settlement, on technology with space applications, and she has a consulting firm. She's done everything. And she's also worked at the International Court of Justice for Justice Greenwood. And I've known Jerry for a long time, and she is just delightful and amazing. So welcome, Jerry.
Thanks,
and
Stephen.
Guoyu Wang. Yay! I didn't get any claps when I was introduced, Torsten. I'm feeling a bit upset there.
You'll get them next time.
Oh, thank you. Guoyu Wang, another dear friend. It's so lovely to see you just before Chinese New Year. Thanks for taking the time. Guoyu has a doctorate degree in law and economics. He's a founder of a consultancy called Harmonized Space, which I think is lovely. And he's here today speaking really as Harmonized Space. But he's got so many other qualifications. He's the Dean of the Academy of Law, Space Policy and Law at BIT, Beijing Institute of Technology. He's a senior fellow at the Chatham House Institute of International Affairs. He served as a Chinese delegate to and a legal consultant to kopi-o on the IADC. He's been a Chinese expert in the long-term sustainability working group. He's represented China in many different fields on space-related. He's an editorial member and expert on the McGill Manual for International Law applicable to military use of outer space, the Millimos project. He's been an expert in the Hague International Working Group on Space Resources Governance. He's a member of GEGSLA. He's done everything, and he is an incredibly knowledgeable person when it comes to space. And Guoyu and I have worked together a lot, and he just has the most extraordinarily perceptive ideas. So welcome, Guoyu. So let's start with our next tradition is your word on space. As everybody knows who have been here before, we ask our guests to describe the wonders of space, the wonders of space law with their one word. And we've had lots of words: expansive, infinite, cooperative, changing, reassuring, etc. I won't go through them all, except to say that my word was intergenerational. And my dear friend Torsten, who was our reality check always, his word was ambiguous, which I thought was interesting. So Jerry, tell us your word on space.
Thanks, Stephen. The word I chose, it was hard because trying to pick a word out of a wonderful language with so many wonderful words. My word is visionary. And for me, visionary is an adjective and a noun. As an adjective, visionary means thinking about or planning the future with imagination and with wisdom. And as a noun, visionary means someone with original ideas about what the future will or could be like. And both are applicable to space law. So it isn't just about chasing after the tech and business developments in the field, but really about giving serious thought about the future of the space sector. And with really creative imagination and practical wisdom leading through with legislative policy and economic strategy. So space law also draws people like the friends I'm having breakfast with right now, people with very original, unique ideas about what the future will or could be like. And it's a very special kind of crowd that space law draws. So very dynamic, out-of-the-box thinkers who are not afraid to test the limits of what can be done in order to secure a future that is the best for all of us going forward. So visionary is my word.
Oh, that's a great word. And if I may say, you are a visionary as well.
Oh, Stephen, you have my heart.
So wonderful. Guoyu, welcome again. Tell us your word for space.
Thank you, Stephen. So first, just good morning, afternoon, and evening. And I'm very happy, to come in this awesome cafe in Singapore. And under the background music, OST music. And just have this space law breakfast with all of you, and also so many familiar names, on the guest list. So I learned that many, fantastic ideas have been taken by our colleagues, in the previous the breakfast. I'm thinking that just a little bit connection with my consultancy, harmonize. So my word is harmonizing when talking about, the space or space law. Because the mysterious universe, just operates in a harmonizing way. It is a combination, or a magic coexistence of different galaxy, species, and I think just so does the space law. It has to be harmonized, and coexisted with the development of space technology and different needs of within politics. And simultaneously, I also believe that it's harmonizing. I mean, space law itself is also harmonizing the different needs and interests of human beings. And last word is that harmonizing just means everything is subject to the rule of universe. In Chinese philosophy is tourism or Do. It means that both space and space law just is marching, in the evolutionary routine, from birth to death and rebirth. So that's my idea. Yeah.
Thanks, Guoyu. And harmonizing. I love that idea of harmonizing. And if we all took up that idea that space harmonizes us, brings us together in this evolution, you say, well, that would solve so many of the problems. Okay, but there are problems. There are issues. Let's explore some. So as most people would know, in early December, China notified formally UN-USA in Vienna that it had undertaken a couple of what it called collision avoidance measures to move their taikonauts and out of what they thought was harm's way from Starlink satellites, once in July and once in October of last year. China claimed that these satellites were, and I quote now, they constituted dangers to the life or health of astronauts aboard the space station, and made reference to the Outer Space Treaty, Article 5. So these claims are interesting in and of themselves, but they raise much broader issues about collision, space traffic management, the framework, responsible behavior, the increasing number of satellites, and geopolitics. So let's unpick that. Guoyu, from your perspective, what does this mean? What is the notification by China? Tell us about the need to formulate some rules of the road to avoid on-orbit collisions. What's your take on this?
Oh, thank you, Stephen, for the floor. And yeah, I see so many comments, no matter domestically, internationally, which are just taking the Chinese diplomatic note as a bugle call, another bugle call against the United States. And some commentators, they are worrying about that. It might, even deteriorate the tense Sino-American space relations. However, first, I have to say I'm not convinced that would be the true or the main intention of this diplomatic note. I prefer to take it as a great chance, for these two countries to sit down, to have breakfast, together, and to speak frankly in respect of the rules of road for the avoidance of on-orbit collisions. For instance, first, at least I think they are supposed to achieve the common understandings about the necessity and urgency, to talk about such kind of rules. For me, as to the specific rules, I like to propose some principles briefly, of course, to be considered by our governments and to space industry and academy. So all these recommended principles are supposed to answer the question that when there are conjunction or collision risks in orbit between two space objects, which one's operator or responsible state has the burden, always say the duty, to conduct measures, to do maneuvers of avoidance proactively. So the first principle is a safety first principle. So it's just simple. It means that burden should be allocated to the one who are in the better position, or we say stronger, have stronger capability to avert the collision to the greatest extent feasible or practicable. But it has to be taken together with some other principles. So the second one will be less cost principle. That's just encouraged by the economic theory. The burden should be allocated to the one who can avoid collision in the lower cost, supposing both of them have such kind of capabilities to do so. And the third one is a priority of evaluable project like the manned mission or deep space exploration mission, because they are expensive, and human beings, that's about the lives of human beings. So in such scenarios, I think special consideration should be given to these missions. For instance, like the operator of the mega constellation should consider to do maneuver proactively to guarantee or safeguard the safety of astronauts and a launching window, some very limited, precious, the launching window of invaluable projects. You miss that window, it means that next one would come maybe years later. So, and the fourth one is reciprocal committee principle. It means that when neither of the mentioned principles could apply clearly, states or operators are encouraged to do so proactively, on the reciprocal basis. I just do conduct the maneuver this time proactively, and next time that's the turn to you to do so as the spirit of a committee. And the last one, I think, is also very simple. Attribution of burdens to risks maker principle. The one who brings the such kind of collision risks should proactively conduct, the such kind of avoidance measures. So that's my very preliminary thoughts at this stage. I think it could be considered by and discussed by of course, all of us. Thank you, Stephen.
Great. Thank you, Guoyu. Some wonderful ideas there. And really, there's so much there that we could unpick. Sadly, we don't have all the time, but I think we must continue this discussion and it must go broader. Jerry, this is another near miss, if you like. Okay, and there have been many, many near misses, but more and more the near misses involve not just state-owned and operated, but private enterprise as well. And so what's the role of the non-governmental sector in both adhering to, but also, if you like, fashioning the ideas and the rights of obligations for the future that, some of which Guoyu referred to then? Is it a two-way street, or is it always going to be governments imposing on private sector, even if that may not actually work for the private sector? How will it work? How should we move forward on this?
Thanks, Stephen. I think, well, first we also have to acknowledge that we're seeing a lot of near misses in the recent past, but it's not just near misses between satellites. In the last 12 hours, I'm sure you would have seen the news explode all over the world about a possible, well, not possible, what will happen. A rocket that was launched by SpaceX is on course to the moon. It will, impact on the moon's surface. Now, this is part of, as you all know, for our audience that has followed, this is part of the Falcon 9 booster. It was launched in 2015, but after completing its mission, it didn't have enough fuel to return to Earth and instead remain in space. Now, it has lost control over this booster, and the rocket was then abandoned in high orbit about 7 years ago. So what happened was, you see these things following the laws of gravity. So we have, of course, the laws that we make up. We have the laws of physics that we all have to abide by. So aside from just really, we should look basically beyond just Earth orbit and the near misses between satellites. We also need to look now at the environmental impact on celestial bodies like the moon. We have one moon. That moon, of course, has a bunch of resources and a lot of interest commercially, but it also is of very big cultural significance to a lot of people on Earth. We understand that on March the 4th, this booster will impact the far side of the moon. There will be no great scientific value to that impact. And of course, it will leave the artificial crater. So I think we need to also just look a little further. But maybe, Stephen, to quickly just go to your very, very pertinent question. Now, the usual space law response, as you all well know, always turn to Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty, always talk about international responsibility for national activities, whether these activities are governmental or non-governmental. Now, we all know this well. But I think now we need to look at ambient developments in the field. So we need to take a look at this from different perspectives, including the role of non-government sectors and actors in shaping legislative and policy leadership. Now, I think there are two things to keep in mind. There is a shift, and those of us who are involved in international intergovernmental work have seen in the last few years, there's a little shift towards engaging more kinds of actors. So not just states have a voice anymore. Really, the non-governmental sectors, the NGOs, the companies, they really start to have greater say in creating and shaping international policy. However, I don't think in the near future that this traditional Westphalian state-centric focus of international law will be completely or substantially replaced by a more grassroots movement. So the fact is, when we look at, for example, the note verbal that China sent forward, it was sent to the United Nations towards the Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space. And these are fora, and the fora that discuss these sort of events basically shows this to very good effect, that states are still and will continue to be very important players in this field. So what does that mean? It means that we have to deal with a system that is still quite state-based, but moving towards reform. And the surrender of this sway can always be a little complex. The other thing we need to consider, of course, is the motivations and interests of the non-governmental sectors. And that, again, is such a wide range of different actors. You have commercial entities who have to answer to their shareholders. You have really civil society who really want to make this place better. And all the more so in relation to environment. So we're seeing a lot of analogous issues in international environmental law. And I think it takes a lot of enlightenment from all these sectors, because to give up some authority and power from the part of the states takes enlightenment. For the future, for commercial entities to invest today in something that has a return many years from now is delayed gratification, and that also takes enlightenment. And how do you justify this to shareholders? So we need altruism, and also we need vision. So we need to know, standing today, what do we do that's good for tomorrow? We want to avoid any sort of ideas that might be simply greenwashing, so pretending that we're doing something good that's not really it. And we then need to take into account the phenomena of liberalism, polylateralism, and collaborative public diplomacy. So I think all this is going to, all these pieces are moving. It's going to get more complex. It's a very VUCA world today. But I think we cannot just disregard any parts of these moving pieces anymore.
I completely agree. I've been, like you and Guoyu and others, real advocates for civil society having a voice, and that's why we all do all the things we do. And as you know, I have the honor of co-chairing the working group on resources at KOPOS. And part of our mandate is we've been, the working group will examine not just the legal framework, but what's going on, what's the existing practices, what are the technical challenges, where do we get that information? States will, of course, have some of that information, but a lot of it has to be garnered from civil society. And so I think, within the confines, and of course, we have to work in this intergovernmental system, but within the confines of that, there will, I completely agree, be more and more cross-fertilization of ideas between the governmental and non-governmental. Remember, KOPOS already has 42 permanent observers who are non-governmental. I mean, some of them are intergovernmental organizations, but a lot of them are not. So I agree with you. Let's move on because time always flies. We're talking here, I think your point is really valid about going beyond small sats, but let's just come back to small sats for a minute. Guoyu, in the first batch of the Starlink satellites, 3 or 4 years ago, Starlink 44, there was a collision avoidance mechanism done by the European Space Agency to move one of its Earth observation satellites, ELIS, from Starlink 44, right? That was in the first batch of 60. There are now, I'm not sure exactly how many, but about 1,600 Starlink, and they have plans for many more, but they are not alone. This is not, we're not going down on Starlink, but it's part of the puzzle. So Guoyu, what are the attractions? Why are people sending up these constellations? But of course, what are the particular risks that they pose?
Oh, thank you, Stephen. So I'm also wondering why the constellation is so attractive. I'm not an expert in this field, but I was heard that such kind of a constellation just are becoming a popular solution for global telecommunications, including, in particular, to the remote rural areas, isolated communities. For instance, like maybe when the network is finished, established, it could provide like a communication. We know recently the volcanic, the eruption in Tonga. So, but right now SpaceX, no one could provide such kind of communication so far. And besides, it could also provide like more sensing, like space, upper atmosphere research, astronomy, or education in a more efficient way, hopefully. But as we know, the big concern of internet community is about space debris. But to be honest, such kind of small satellites, which are, without the capabilities, maneuverabilities, we say, without the capability to do maneuver, they are just identical to space debris, which would be definitely bringing risks to others, So I think it's well recognized that it's just greatly increase the rate of conjunction or collision in orbit. And as I just mentioned, it also affects the launching window of others a lot. Also, I believe, including when we're taking the Starlinks as an example, it also affects the launches from United States or even from Elon Musk himself. So that's the basic situation there.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with you. But it's a global problem, isn't it? So, we know the Starlink numbers. And again, Starlink is just one player. OneWeb, another company is looking to do several thousand. Amazon, China itself has announced that it wants to launch 13,000. And then something that just staggered me last year, I'm sure everybody heard this, but in September of last year, Rwanda filed at the ITU for frequency allocations in relation to, now I hope everybody is sitting down, I'm going to say a number slowly, 327,000. I'll say it again, 327,000 small satellites. And then I looked up the details of these filings, 327,000 small satellites over a relatively short period, I think it was 10 years, but in a really narrow plane of between 550 and 650 kilometers above the Earth. You know, even if a tenth or a quarter of that number happened, it's still an incredible increase in the number of objects. So, Jerry, we've heard all these plans. Guoyu is right. There are great benefits. There are also conjunction risks. Where to from here? You know, are these plans feasible, and how will we manage this?
Thank you, Stephen. That's a staggering number, absolutely staggering number, not just from Rwanda, but when you put all of these together, all of these constellations, we're talking of upwards of 500,000 satellites in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we all really just need to take a step back and first even question whether these 500,000 new satellites are absolutely necessary. Do we really, what are we doing this for? I mean, while space, of course, we want to protect the freedom of exploration and use and the democratic access to outer space, I think we need to start asking, is this a responsible use of outer space? I think this is quite important. And there is precedent for this in international law. So when we're looking at, for example, the use of territory already from Trail Smelter, we know, cross-border harm, environmental harm, transboundary environmental harm is not something that is acceptable to the international community, and for good reason. So the question is basically, will this race to place as many satellites as possible in LEO in the next 10 years, will it actually hinder further future plans that would be for the benefit of humanity? I think this is the first question we need to ask. Now, technically speaking, how feasible is this? Which is a very good question. Now, given the technology we have for current bandwidth use and the impact of congestion on space traffic management and conjunction avoidance, we have a lot of questions there. There's bandwidth interference. There's a question of whether we will have telemetry and control over these sort of many tiny little satellites. Are we going to have entire swarms of out of control satellites that we won't have anything to do with? Will we think about end of life mission maneuvers? What will happen when all of these satellites get to the end of their mission lives? I think technically speaking, we really need to get good scientists, good people to the table, and we need to put forward all these concerns, both from civil society, from commercial entities, and from governments, because it's in everyone's interest. The more the risk of conjunctions increase, the more expensive insurance premiums will get. This will impact on the bottom line for a lot of commercial entities. The greater the risk of environmental impact, the greater the risk will be as well for governments and states who want to have that access to outer space. It will impact on you, me, our children, and their children as to whether they can leave the planet. So we were looking basically, and we haven't gotten there yet, but we're looking at a system where you would have heard, I think David Attenborough just said very, very recently, we're leaving one age of the Earth and moving to another because of our impact. As the species that is the most pervasive, everything that we do has an impact on the environment around us, including in low Earth orbit. So I think we need to look at our tech now and really say, do we have the current technology that we have? Does it work for our bandwidth use for these 500,000 satellites? And if it doesn't make sense to keep issuing these licenses. Now, the third thing, of course, is our institutional space law. And the question is whether the current framework works. Can or should a state be able to file for 327,000 slots at a go? Why or why not? And can or should the ITU have the final say? Should they also have a consultation? How will this consultation look? Why should this take place? And I think there we kind of go back to the original question. How does diplomacy change and shift to adapt to these developments? Obviously, Rwanda has as much right to put up a satellite as the bigger countries that are spacefaring. And it's not a matter of which country or how. It's a matter of, as a species, as humanity, how do we use legislative policy leadership to make sure that we go down the right path?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a global problem. We've talked about several companies, several countries, but it's a global issue. The impacts are on everybody. I agree. We need to change the thinking about how we manage this, because essentially we're all in it together. And, short-term gain doesn't give rise necessarily to long-term gain. And anyway, look, we could talk about this forever. I'm going to move on a bit. I'm going to go to our reality check, Torsten, because it's always, we lawyers, we have these highfalutin ideas, and then Torsten brings us back to us and say, come on, guys. So, Torsten, a question for you. And you meet many of them, national authorities have the role to authorize, continually supervise activities by non-governmental entities. So that's in the national regulations. National authorities regulate those within the national jurisdiction. Decisions are made with national interests. But you've heard from Jerry, you've heard from Guoyu that the implications are global. And so do you think, and if so, how, we need to do this shift of thinking that we're talking about, taking national authorities, moving them away from this national thinking, this parochial thinking, to a recognition that essentially we're all in this together? And you talk, Torsten, to the leaders of these authorities. Do they see this? Will they change? Will they move away, or at least partially move their thinking towards a more global perspective on their decisions? And what's your perspective, Torsten?
I love when you challenge me. So instead of asking me for a reality check, you give me, hey, solve our issues.
And win the Nobel Peace Prize. That's right.
Yeah. Secure the world or rescue the world. No. I have really concerns that it's not on the levels that we would love to have it. One thing, and I just returned from the EU Space Conference in Brussels yesterday night. What I saw was, okay, it was Europe, it was not global, but Europe starts thinking together. It will be a process. And I mean, it's good. That's very good. There is some hope. We saw last year at the G7 meeting in Cornwall that, in my opinion, the first time the global leaders recognized space as an sensible and important environment, a critical infrastructure for all of us. So from this awareness to action, it's obviously a process. The question is, do we have the time for all these processes, or do we have to find a shortcut for that? I'm convinced that at the moment, with the current European Commission spirit shown yesterday at the conference, the new ESA administrator, Josef Aschbacher, who also I had a pleasure with to interview, and I talked with him about these issues, particularly, and it will come out next weekend or so, or on our website. They have it on their map. They know about it. They don't have an answer yet, but they know we have to do something. And again, we have in Europe the beauty of that we have almost 30 countries, 27 countries, nationalities, local governments, and so on. And of course, they have the authority, as you mentioned. Might they be signatory to the Outer Space Treaty or not? But they are responsible for the behaviors of what comes out of their country, or what is done by the countries. So, but many of these countries does not have a space law. Germany has no space law. We have an idea, we have a strategy 10 years old. I mean, how applicable is it today? We have Luxembourg, which goes in a very particular direction with their space law. So there are initiatives, and we heard it from the European Parliament members, for a European space law. How feasible that is? We don't know. I mean, our friend Professor Kai-Uwe Schroge spoke about a European legislation on that. So we have to move in a process where we agree on certain things. And orbital usage, orbital, call it blockage or so, frequency usage, and so on and so forth are among them. And I know I didn't answer your question particularly. I don't give you the 42 answer how to save the world, but I just want to put in my 5 cents in it.
You were about at 21, I would say, but it was still an excellent answer. Look, I agree. I think we all see, I mean, if people recognize the problems, that's the first step. The next step is to understand the details of what is the problem and how does it caused, and therefore how can we fix it. I'm seeing, I know others are actually good faith, notwithstanding, obviously this is a difficult geopolitical period we're in, but good faith generally amongst people who think about space, that we need to have this global perspective, whilst at the same time, of course, we all want to maximize our national advantage. You know, it's coming, I see it at COP-o-s more and more, but there are still many issues. Torsten, let's take a question, and then, because I want to move on to AI, because, you know, Guoyu and Jerry are such experts on that area, and I want to speak about that as well. And
there's an AI question just coming in from Iona.
Maybe we'll do that at the end. We'll do that.
Absolutely,
at the end.
Yeah. I would like to take the question from Valentin. And I know, I mean, Valentin always comes up with really complex questions, so there is no simple answer. No, yes, no, done it, check. No, his question is, what seems to be missing is a description of system effects not covered by traditional case-by-case risk analytics to reach a point of impact descriptions and causality. So who could do that, and who's responsible is that?
Wow, that's a great question.
Over to you.
Great question, Valentin, and I believe it's your birthday as well. You and Mozart, so, and the Outer Space Treaty, so happy birthday. My 2 cents worth, you know, look,
don't ask who's the eldest.
That's right. That's right. 266 is Mozart.
You can't beat it.
We're increasing our technology about a whole range of things of understanding the universe, understanding space, but we're still a long way behind where we need to be to really understand all of the dangers. You're absolutely right. We need that expertise. Jerry, Guoyu, where do we find this expertise? How can we develop the techniques to have these much more sophisticated and nuanced risk assessments? Because we know the risk assessments we have now, as good as they are still very approximate. And, you know, we don't know exactly, we can't compute where 2 objects in orbit will be in relation to each other at any one moment. We can't be absolutely precise. So we can do what we can, but how do we improve? Jerry, Guoyu, over to you. Solve this dilemma for us.
And win the Nobel Prize. If I may, just my 2 cents worth, and maybe a bit of an out-of-the-box idea. A lot of people across the world are spending a lot of computer time, computer energy, and their own intellectual capacity mining things like Bitcoin and so on. And I think that's an untapped resource. 2 things here. I think we do have the technical capability, we're close to the technical capability to really start to map things properly, to track these things. But there are 2 issues. One is that we need to have a motivation to focus more on this specific issue. So really talk about risk and analytics without the conflict of interest that may possibly come up when you're a commercial entity or a reinsurer or anything like that. So civil society is unbelievably important here. And we have people who map the galaxy in their own free time, search for extraterrestrial intelligence on their own free time. Surely there are also people across the globe willing to put forward their own energy, talents, and time and computing energy towards doing something like that. And we need to leverage that. And how? I think a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, might be the way forward. It might be a good thing to have something on the distributed ledger. It is a completely trustless system. You don't really need to have a repository somewhere and hope that that's really someplace that can be trustworthy. There is not a bureaucracy behind it. It is the ledger. It is there. It is immutable. And I think this might be one way forward. We've seen this in some other fields already. It might be something to think about. But I think Valentin very correctly puts it in two different questions. Who can do this and whose responsibility? Those are two different groups of people or entities at the moment. And perhaps we need to think about how legislative leadership can merge those two a little closer so that the people who are responsible will also speak to the people who can do this. And the people who can do this are slowly made responsible for this. So a lot of, as Stephen, you say, for high polluting ideas, maybe a bit out there, but it could be the next thing. I mean, I think it's a matter of speaking across sectors and across the world. It is really an untapped resource, but I'd love to hear what Guoyu has to say.
Yeah, I agree. And we know this with climate change. States, for example, don't like taking responsibility for things, but if the possibilities are put to them, maybe they can act a bit more proactively in some way, shape or form. Guoyu, what's your perspective? Are you hopeful that we can find greater technology that will help us to better understand the real risks and therefore better understand ways that we can prevent collisions and conjunctions and pollution?
To win Nobel Prize, right?
There are lots of Nobel Prizes tonight. Anyone in the audience as well?
I'm not an expert in this case, but of course, happy birthday to Valentin first. And hopefully my answer could be eligible, to kind of a birthday, like it's about. I will try. I think that's the two ties. First one is who is doing the similar matters, handling with a similar matter, and who should be responsible internationally in future. And first, I know IDC, they're doing such kind of taking care of such kind of business conjunction assessment. They have the different groups like modeling, to calculate the rate about conjunction or to do conjunction assessment. But the legal character, of IDC is even not like inter-governmental organization. It's just interagency, right? So then it just moves to brings another question: who shall be or should be responsible for this matter? I think at this stage, from technical perspective, when I attended the LTS discussion, I think that should be guideline before is about conjunction assessment. That's a proposal from China that all the capable, states they're supposed to reach on like the common standard about some conjunction threshold, some technical, terms there. I believe that Russia Federation, China, United States, they're just using different technical standards in this case. Then it just brings like fake false. The false alarming matters. That's the first point. And second one is just, as I said in the very beginning of this talk, is a revolutionary routine. So it could be taken from bilateral dialogue, or among certain states, and then to consider international standard. And maybe there would be a new duty of WUSA or kopi-o. I'm not quite sure yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it gets back to your harmonizing idea, that bringing the people together. Part of the problem, of course, is that countries don't want to necessarily let others know what their capabilities are, or indeed what their capabilities are not. And so that sharing, getting together, sharing and pooling together resources, it's necessary, but it's tough. And this gets back to what we've all said. It's the thinking. We've got to try to change this for the greater good. We shall see. In the remaining time, and we're always running late, Torsten, I know, but Jerry and Guoyu, I just want to ask you a bit about the AI side, and I know, Jerry, you already touched on some of these issues. You've spoken a lot about AI and machine learning and blockchain and how it's incorporated into space. Could you just briefly just tell us how AI and all of that technology is changing the way that space activities are being undertaken?
Sure, Stephen, and with apologies to, for example, Torsten, who's heard me go on at length about this. I spoke about this at a recent another Space Café talk. But I mean, when we're talking about technology, of course, what we're seeing in terms of development recently are probably, changes in the way the space industry is using technology. So, for example, the use of DLT, so the distributed ledger technology, and blockchain in outer space. And also, as you touched on, Stephen, artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning. Now, in the space industry, what we're seeing is a lot of the use of really the ledger, so the tokenization of value and supply chains. That's become a thing. Now, of course, you see a lot of DAOs and DAOs and this sort of systems being used for public funding of space activities. That also means that we see a two-way interaction between the space economy and the digital economy. We see, for example, quite recently, Space Chain in the last few months has just launched a bunch of nodes of Ethereum into space. They're sitting on the space station right now. And I think there we're starting to see also a lot of different ways of doing it. Now, I think I just saw a question in the chat, again from Valentine, about whether we need a digital twin for outer space. Might be actually something to consider, a digital twin, not for outer space. That's quite a big thing to do. I think the European Space Agency back in 2013 launched the Gaia telescope, and that's already trying to make a 3D map of the galaxy. But we're talking about the digital twin of celestial bodies like the moon or Mars. That allows, of course, a twin to be used for things like resource exploration and that sort of thing. So maybe that will be one thing forward. Now, artificial intelligence, however, we're seeing great use of that right now. So we see AI, for example, in mission design and planning. You see Daphne, satellite data processing, both in Earth observation, meteorological satellites, but also for satellite health. So you see AI to check on their own health of the satellite. You see astronaut assistants on the ISS. We had Simon, we had Robonaut, all using AI to assist human spaceflight. We also now see, of course, machine learning in space debris mitigation and remedy, which helps with, for example, conjunction avoidance. So, for example, SpaceX is saying Starlink satellites will all be equipped with machine learning and AI to avoid the sort of conjunctions. Of course, we're seeing AI and machine learning and navigation, so a virtual moon map, sort of like on one way to a digital twin. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, for example, is also something that uses AI. And now we're using deep machine learning for satellite development. So we're really seeing a lot of the digital economy and digital technology we have today embedded in the space field. Not surprising, I think, because these are really two fields that touch the frontiers of what we know in technology.
Wow, it's extraordinary. I could listen to that for hours. And of course, it raises the question of how the humble lawyer is going to have to deal with all this. So Guoyu,
Stephen,
yeah.
May I jump in? Your wish is heard. So you will hear from Gary on that matter in length in a special Space Café series. So we are picking that up, and so if you wish something, we will have it. We will deliver to you.
Right. I'll bring another breakfast. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. Guoyu, we're already seeing, for example, now AI being incorporated into collision avoidance mechanisms. You will know in last year's problem in the Manfred Lachs moot court competition, which I had wrote with Alex Suchek, we took real world technology, AI, automatic collision avoidance systems, and we had the problem where the systems of two separate satellite constellations were incompatible, and things followed from that. So we're seeing that is real. It's based on real technology, and we've heard all of the things that Jerry's talked about. this is how will law deal with this? Is the existing framework equipped to deal with situations where essentially it could be argued that humans are no longer in the loop? That automated systems and AI, which have been designed by humans, no doubt, are making the decisions that have implications for what goes on in space. How will law cope? What do we need to do, Guoyu? And this really is a Nobel Peace Prize question.
Thank you, Stephen. So first, I have to say, I'm young, I know, but I'm kind of old-fashioned people. I'm not always, I would be very hesitant, cautious about new things. AI just one of them. I know that AI just could bring so many solutions, but I don't believe that AI would bring all the solutions, answers to the problems. Even so, itself would be a big problem if AI could solve everything. So AI for me is just supposed to follow an order, a decision, rather than just making decision, taking place of human beings. So that's the first point. Otherwise, you can ask AI how to solve the problem from the space legal perspective. Not the duty of us, we just lose the jobs. But as you mentioned that the case of the Space Moon Core computation last year, you see that's just the accident, or always the incident brought by the two AI systems. Both of them recognize the other as a space debris, as a risk or a big threat, and the conduction, the maneuvers simultaneously, so caused that accident. So from legal perspective, I think first about as you mentioned, the liability responsibility, also mentioned by Jerry, is we well know about all of these, but that's just kind of ex post regime. It does not provide a functional or workable solution how to avoid such kind of accident happening from us occurring. So first, I think still their states need to talk about the standardization, international standard for such kind of AI systems. That's the first step. And then coordinative mechanisms among different, such kind of AI systems. And then just as Valentin asked, similar to that question, whether we need an international fora platform to handle with such kind of space traffic control or coordination matters to avoid such kind of, the two AI systems just operates wrongfully in a wrongful way. So I think it's not about the legal principle, it's just about specific mechanisms to in this.
Yeah, I tend to agree, although, I'm not quite sure, when you say...
You're younger than me, so you're...
I'm not. I'm a Sputnik baby. You say, AI, we really don't like the idea, but it's happening anyway, it's happening. I do work in international humanitarian law, and we're having similar issues now with not semi-autonomous weapons, but autonomous weapons. And how do they make those really, really difficult choices that you have to make under the rules of warfare in terms of what is a legitimate target? Really, really tough decisions. Luckily, we have an engineer amongst us, don't we, Torsten? You.
Oh, okay. I thought this guy in the corner.
Torsten, help us here, okay? There's lots of issues, but there are moral and ethical issues also, which both Guoyu and Jerry touched upon when it comes to, is there a point of designing the technology because we can, recognizing that we, ultimately we might be taking humans out of the loop, like the autonomous weapons. As an engineer, as a scientist, you speak to them as well. What's your feeling about the role of ethics and morality in the real sense for scientists and engineers who are working on technology? I mean, should they care? I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but should they, is it part of their function to care about what this technology, the results of this technology, or is it their function to leave that to the diplomats and the decision makers, etc.? You know, how does it work? And it's so relevant to space now.
Absolutely. And thanks for another very easy question with a 42 answer to give. I think we have to bridge between the ethics and all the moral aspects you mentioned and innovation. So innovation is driven usually by young people, by folks that want to encounter the world and make big changes. What is great? So, but how to channel it? And I'm with you, Guoyu, to say, hey, I feel young, but I'm old-fashioned. I mean, I don't have the capacity, and that's why we introduced this blockchain series, because it's primarily for me that Torsten can learn about what blockchain is at the end. Because even after the Space Café with Jerry, where she really tried hard to explain it to me, I don't get it. Sorry, maybe it's above my horizon or so, and I can't grasp it. I have an idea, but that's it. So coming back to the question, I think the moral aspect, as you said, it's with diplomats and all these people. It's in one silo, but this silo is not connected to the other silo of engineering and science or space, whatever it is. And you have rarely these dots that are connecting to each other, but it's not happen on a regular basis. We had the pleasure in one of our episodes for the Space Café podcast that Markus most likely talked to the chief or the philosopher in residence at CNES. And his role is to ask the nasty question. Shall we do that? Why are we doing it? And really ask for that. So there are particular organizations that have that capacity already, but I think it's not common sense. And now break it down from a government level, what an agency is at the end, to a company, I think that is missing. But it needs to be asked more and more. And I mean, I have the great pleasure to work with an incredible young lady that runs our events and coordinates our event, Chiara, who studies sustainability. And we had this chat about, hey, is that what we do right or wrong? And what are the answer of the youth for that? Or such as, how pessimistic do you see the world? Do you have even a chance to go optimistic into the future with all the problems that we have? And I think we make it very easy in space and say, oh, space is cool and we love it and we go to the horizon and beyond. No, stop for a second and ask yourself, is that the right one? But to answer your question, we need it, but we are not there yet.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I've said this on a previous program, we really need to start, and again, this is a change of thinking, prioritizing what we do in space. You know, if we can do, I always say, if we can do 500 things in space, because we can do them, we need to start prioritizing as a humanity, what are the 300 that we should be doing, and, you know, perhaps put other, because not only for the ethical and moral aspects of that, but also, you know, space is hard, things go wrong, you cause more pollution, it takes a lot of time, effort and money. And so we really need to prioritize our thinking, and all of these issues that you and Jerry and Guoyu raise are just so important in trying to work it out. You know, but the decisions have to be taken with this broader perspective. I think we all agree that. Let's see if there are any other questions from our audience or in the chat,
Yep.
Torsten, because I know we're over time as always, but you know, that's the way it is.
As our production team refused today to do the job, it's on my responsibility when we close. So we take the time it needs. No, I want to take the question of the wonderful Iona Bratu in the Q&A. And she writes, or she asks, last year in April, SpaceX disabled its automated AI-powered collision avoidance system to allow OneWeb to move its satellite out of the way. This is just an example of the increasing role of AI in space and related activities, including collision avoidance. Is international space law, specifically the Liability Convention, ready to deal with potential collisions caused by, for example, malfunctions of AI system? And I think that's the $1 million question, and over to you for an answer.
Thanks, Iona. It's a great question. We've sort of talked about this already, and I would encourage you to look at some of the memorials from the last year's Manfred Lex, because they raise these issues. But Jerry, what's your thought? You know, what can we specifically do? And I also want to throw in the point based on what Torsten said, that, you know, this sounds like heresy, but we all know that law does not necessarily reflect ethics and morals, you know, and my morals and ethics are going to be different from yours, going to be different from other people anyway, so you can't standardize that. So law has a role to play in dealing with these issues where humans are taken out of the system. So how are we going to do that?
That's a fantastic question, Stephen. I think the issue actually is when we're looking at law and what law is for. I mean, usually law addresses a certain mischief, as we say in the common law, right? So we have a problem and we want to address that problem, and we come up with a law. Sometimes laws develop over a period of time. A very basic thing to do, for example, with human rights is the worth of a woman, where a woman's, testimony in court in some jurisdiction is worth exactly half of what a man's is worth, for example, something like that. And this changes over time in different societies at different rates. I take the point that we need to sit back. I think we've all said this in various different words. We need to take a step back and look at where we're going and why we're going there. This is unbelievably important. But there is something maybe to counter. I think, I hear my friend Guoyu, and I see this over and over again. Do we need AI? Does this replace the human part of all of this, law and ethics and policy and morals? I would take a little venture. Now, I like technology very much. I really am a technophile, but not for the sake of it. So Torsten's already heard me say, I don't believe we should apply DLT to everything. That doesn't make sense. What we need to do actually is to look at it now. Obviously, we have deep tech. And I think what we need to do now is go deep human. There are things about humans that cannot still be programmed into an artificial form, an artificial intelligence. It is our conscience, our ethics, our morality, as you say, and the laws that we make in the fabric of society, this contract that we have amongst ourselves in a community that we live in today. I think that's basically what needs to shift. So when we look at Iona's question about the Liability Convention, it was, back in the 70s, we were addressing a specific problem, which was that states are going into outer space, there's going to be damage. What do we do with that damage? And the convention was meant for that. It means that it looks at a certain perspective of damage that could be done. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, when we're talking about intelligence, we need to basically ask, what does this intelligence entail? There is a huge difference, as Stephen, you will know, between autonomous things and automatic things. So do you actually remove the human discretion from it or not? And if you do that, between autonomy and automatism, what is the difference legally? And I think these are all questions not just specific to space, but we need to answer in relation to AI governance. And this is really important because this relates, of course, to attribution, which is at the base of international law and things like the convention, but it also relates to approaches. Are we data-driven? Are we symbolic approach-driven? And this will touch on more than space. It will touch on issues like privacy protection, responsibility and liability in international law, non-discrimination, the ethical aspects of self-driving vehicles, also in outer space, the laws of war, as Stephen has said, quality control, transparency, all of those things. And I don't think we have a specific answer yet. But that's what's so wonderful about all of this. We are born at what is probably the most exciting time, not just in technology, but also in law, because we can shape this today. So yeah, I don't think, I mean, like, in that sense, Iona brought up a fantastic question. I don't think we should unpack the liability convention and say it is obsolete. It really is not. But we do need to look at it in the contemporary developments today and see how does it make sense to apply this convention from the 70s to something in 2022, where we had the idea of artificial intelligence back in the 70s, but today we see it. And we see all the things that come with it. Now, how would this convention, all the ideals, then still apply today? Should they apply today? How do they apply today?
Yeah, great questions. And those discussions are going on in the laws of war, as you know. How do the ideals of the Geneva Conventions, for example, apply to the technology of warfare today, where, as I said, human discretion and ethics and morals perhaps play a less standard? Great question. So, Guoyu, final word is with you. Are you pessimistic or optimistic or realistic, or what do you think? Okay, given the way the technology is moving, and you said that you're a bit of a Luddite, you don't like these change, but it's going to happen, and we have to live with it, and it's our job and the people that come and that we talk to try to find the best way forward for the benefit of humanity and not to completely screw up space. Are you optimistic? And can we do this? Are we capable of doing this? Or should we just, is the doomsday clock, which is so relevant in other areas, is the doomsday clock also there for space? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. So I always prefer a harmonizing combination of all the, in the smart, appropriate way. So first, I think that my hesitance, to AI does not necessarily mean AI should not apply, in space exploration and use, but it must be limited in a limited scale. Could make sure everything is under control, just as the question shows, in some kind of emergency, it could be shut down or something like that. It must make sure that there always will be a responsible state behind the operation of AI system. It means that it must be under control. So then, just again, is relevant to that question, whether Liability Convention operates or the general international law, the law of states responsibility, something. Always what would be a state have overall control or effective control of the operation of the AI system. So I think that would be a kind of compromise, but as last word would be, I would be not ready really, for the AI just takes over the dominant position of human being to make a command or decision about space affairs, because AI cannot play political will at this stage, I think. And AI is much more smarter than me, but I don't think it has the warm heart as the one I have. So that's the idea there. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, you're welcome. And knowing you so well, warm heart is certainly what you do have, and thank you for that. Torsten, I think we've gone way, way over time, but I'll turn it back to you now, I think.
Yeah, but we take the time it needs. We have really a number of questions, even on LinkedIn. I just was informed about by the wonderful Sumaya in Abu Dhabi, that there are a bunch of questions waiting for us there as well. I will try to bring them together, send them over to you, and maybe we can answer them in writing and send them out together with the video then later on. So.
Oh, thank you, Sumaya, too. Hi to you, and I hope you're well. Yeah.
Stephen, what you did not mention is that we have another cafe, our Space Cafe.
We sure do. We sure do.
Go ahead. It's your program. So,
if today's discussion has done anything, it surely would have excited you with the idea of getting great people in the room over great food in a great cafe and talking about what really matters is so important. And on the 24th of March. We've got two, again, great friends, but amazing people. Marble from Austria and Olavo Bittencourt from Brazil. I haven't yet worked out whether we're having coffee in Vienna or coffee in Sao Paulo. We'll sort that out. But please, if you've got the time, if this idea of having this sort of discussion makes sense for you, come and join it. Olavo and Umgada, wonderful people with amazing knowledge and also incredibly forward, using Jerry's word, incredible vision in terms of what needs to happen. So come and join us on the 24th for Irmgard and Olavo. While I've got the floor here, let me really thank Jerry and Guoyu. I mean, what an extraordinary discussion we've had. You're incredible people. You have that warm heart, and you have ideas about taking us forward in a really positive way, and we need that. We need people exactly with that thinking. So thank you for joining us for breakfast. I hope you've enjoyed it. And Torsten and Chiara, I'll pass it back to you.
And we did not talk about our breakfast. That's wonderful what we prepared for this special day, but we are running now out of time. Chiara, over to you.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for this really great talk. As always, I'm just super excited to sit here and listen in and benefit from all this knowledge that you're sharing. But yes, we have a full list of very exciting events coming up. So on the 1st of February, we have our 33 minutes with Dr. Jan Frolov on space arbitration. And then on the 2nd of February, we have our session Elephant in the Room, which is organized by Powering Space. Then, just the day after, on the 3rd of February, we have
maybe you say what is the elephant in the room. I think that's worth to mention for a second.
That is true.
It's not a zoo program.
No, it is a session about harassment and sexual assault within the space sector. So I think a very important topic to discuss. So yeah, I recommend attending. Yes, and then following that, on the 3rd of February, we have our very first Space Café Italy, which is hosted by Dr. Emma Gatti, which will be in Italian. And on the 4th of February, we have our next Space Café Russia by Elena Morozova, who's also in the audience today. And this will not only be in Russian, but will also be translated into English. So really nice.
And not by AI, by a real person.
Yes.
Oh, Guoyu will be happy then.
On the 8th of February, we then continue with our next 33 minutes with Dr. Nanya Strecker. And on the 10th of February, we have two exciting events lined up again. So we first have a panel organized by the Space Arbitration Association by Laura Zielinski, which is answering the question, or at least discussing the question, is there a need for an institution specialized in space disputes? And then we have our next Moriba's Vox Populi, where he's talking about the movie Don't Look Up, but shifting it around a bit to Please Look Up, and how can we get humanity involved in space environmentalism. So as always, all our events are going online on Eventbrite. And yes, we would always love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to our daily and biweekly newsletters. And if you want to treat yourself to something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us in the supporter program. Thank you all very much for your interest today, for asking all your questions. And of course, a huge thank you to Jerry, to Guoyu, to Stephen for this inspiring chat and for being our guest. Stephen, thank you. Have you been happy with the program today?
Oh, look, I always say it, but it does get better and better. And it's just, I get so inspired by the people that come and chat to us over breakfast, but also by the questions and the feedback. Yeah, it's just great. And I can't wait for the next one. I hope that everybody can come and join. And thanks again, Jerry and Guoyu, you know, and you, Torsten, as well. You know, your reality check is always what we need to hear. So thanks, Chiara.
The grumpy old man in the room. Okay, so Then, thank you much, everyone, and don't forget, become a space
Become a
watcher.
space watcher.
Thank you so
Take
much.
good care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe. Bye bye. Thank you.